If you need a subwoofer that can do anything, you need a VS21. Hi, I'm David Lee from BASSBOSS, and this is the VS21 subwoofer. The VS21 is one of our most popular subwoofers. The box is 180 pounds. It has the 2400 watt amp, 4.5-inch coil driver, neodymium motor, and it has feet on the bottom and feet on both sides. And what that allows you to do is you can stack it in any direction and the feet interlock. So you'll see that the box is what we call asymmetrical. So you've got the horn-loaded side and the vented side. So generally speaking, you put the two horn-loaded sides together and the vented sides apart, and you end up with, you can build stacks, a block of 6 or whatever. And then you can put another set on top of that. So you have the feet will interlock in either direction. So where did the VS21 come from? If you're familiar, you might have heard of a scoop, right? And a scoop is effectively an open-backed horn. So you can have a horn that is closed in the back, you can have a horn that's vented in the back, or you can have an open-back horn. Scoops is a way of describing an open-back horn. So you have the driver sound coming off one side, and the other side of the cone goes through the horn, comes out. And it's really a great way to get high SPL over a very narrow bandwidth. But I don't like that. I want flat frequency response. I like the broad flat frequency response. So this box, I wanted to have low frequency extension. And so I looked at doing a version of this that was an 18-inch driver. But realistically, I could fit a 21-inch here, and it didn't compromise the performance. In fact, it made it better. So instead of doing a scoop, instead of doing a full-on horn, we used the vented section as the primary section to give the low-end extension, and used the horn as a secondary section just to increase the sensitivity in the upper bass to get the impact that a heavier 21-inch cone oftentimes lacks. Another thing to bear in mind, the reason it's great as a 21 is because a 21 displaces significantly more air than an 18. So this box gets really, really close to the performance of a double 18. First of all, it's the advantage of this horn-loaded section. And second of all, because it's a 21, it comes so close to the displacement of two 18s, you can see where we're going. We have a slightly smaller, slightly lighter box than a double 18 that uses effectively half the power, which is great for when you're doing stuff where power is limited, where you have only a small number of circuits to use, or when you're running on a generator. And because of that additional sensitivity that you get in that upper bass punchiness, it doesn't even demand that much power from the amplifier. So you get that additional benefit of that higher sensitivity. In other words, this box doesn't really need as many watts as something else would to get the SPL. It's more efficient, so you get a great utilization of power, great utilization of space, and it covers the whole gamut. It gets down into the low bass, and it hits hard for a live kick drum. That's how and why the VS21 is what it is. The efficiency is key with the VS21. So we talk about this box being efficient. How efficient is that? What does that mean in the real world? What that means is that you can connect 3 of these to a 15 amp circuit or 4 to a 20 amp circuit. Now, to do a 20 amp circuit, you need a 20 amp plug, but with a 15 amp plug that comes with it, you can connect 3 of the VS21s to one 15 amp circuit. These have pole sockets on all 4 sides. Now, why is that? So when you have a box sitting this way up and you need to array another one, you can put another VS21 on upside down. So you still get the effect of the low frequencies and then the combined impact of the horn-loaded sections. And what we have is we have a shorty pole, which is basically a 6-inch roughly pole that you put in the pole socket of one, and then you put the other box on top of it, locks it in place. And then, because there's a pole socket in the bottom of the VS21, you can then do the same thing again with a DV12 or an array of 2 DV12s or an AT212 or an AT312 on top of that. So you can get that 6-foot high platform using just 2 boxes of the VS21. In terms of tops, this box actually has a linking mechanism that works with the MFLAs, so these can be used as a ground stack platform for the MFLAs. We put these, this is the vertical configuration, but when it's horizontal, this dimension of 3 feet matches with the MFLA, so you stack 3 of these and you get a 6-foot platform on which you can start building MFLAs. Usually 2 is enough, 3 is more than you need, but in that configuration, you can get extremely high SPL. You'll actually need more subwoofers than that at some point because those MFLAs are extraordinarily loud. And it works great with all of our tops realistically, but one of the most popular and most effective combinations is the VS21 with the AT212. Particularly if you put a set of these together. It is awesome for live music. It is great for those folks who want a big kick drum and, you know, guitars, vocals, everything. It is highly efficient. Both of the VS21 and the AT212 are extremely efficient. They put out a lot of SPL on very little electricity. And if you're running on generators or if you're running on limited amount of electrical supply, the VS21 in combination with the AT212 is absolutely massive in terms of how much sound you can put out there with a really, really small, easy to transport package. Now for something a little bit smaller, the VS21 and the DV12 make a great setup for slightly smaller venues or slightly smaller gigs where you have a need for wider coverage. You don't have quite the need for that extreme sound pressure level. You can use one VS21, one DV12, and you have a really nice package. That is essentially as big as most mobile DJ rigs will need to get. Great horizontal coverage, particularly when you're in rooms that are a little bit less deep than they are wide. You can get into using the DV12 and the VS21s, and you really find it hard to beat that in that context. Now combining subwoofers with subwoofers, you know, if you want just a little bit more chocolate sauce, you can combine the VS21 with the ZV28 and just put a little bit more of that deep bass energy out there while using the VS21 for that hit, that impact. So you're not giving up the kick drum, you're not giving up that hard hit, but you have that bigger scale, longer wavelengths extension that you get with adding the ZV28 to the VS21. If you do, you can go that in either direction. If you have 2 ZV28s and 1 VS21, you have a lot of big low-end extension and you've got solid impact. If you just need a little bit of that big extension, you can use 2 VS21s with 1 ZV28 and you'll still get that big low end, but you'll concentrate more on the hit, on the kick drum, and so on. So depending on the genre, you can mix these things together to achieve the blend that you like. But there's also some cool stuff that combines the VS21 with the Kraken, for instance. The Kraken has really decent forward directivity, but if you wanted to put a Kraken down, then put a VS21 on top of it, you can put the MFLA linkage on it reversed, use it as a cardioid box on the Kraken to cancel some of that low frequency energy coming off the back and still use it to link your line arrays above it. So you have a ground stack line array platform. This works really well in places where you really aren't going to have the ability to fly. Deserts, you know, places where you really have to stack stuff in the ground, where you have to get out in the middle of nowhere. And those are the places where you're going to be running on generators. So another benefit of that very efficient output is that you have these boxes doing that work, and you have, even in that environment, you can have some control over the directivity. You can do that with these boxes with or without the Kraken, but it is nice to know that you can integrate those pieces together because the Kraken is comparable to 4 of these, and effectively you don't need everything that the Kraken does to cancel coming back off of it. So you can use something like this for that purpose. At the same time, you can face it the same direction and just increase the SPL out front by 1 more 21-inch subwoofer and still use it for the same purpose. This box is versatile. It has available carts, so you have carts that are what we call vertical carts, which will go on the bottom of the cabinet. They interlock to the feet, And the box will transport this way up with 1 box per cart. We also make a horizontal cart, which will go on this side of the cabinet. So that means that it's 3 feet by 3 feet. Thing to be aware of with that is that not all doors are big enough for you to go through there with a 3-foot wide cart. However, if you're doing those bigger shows, you want to do that, you can transport 3 or 4 boxes stacked up on 1 cart, which makes that transportation package really, really compact. And so you can get in and out quickly when you have a rig like that. And you can stack them up, even put the line arrays on top and roll them into a truck with that configuration. Super versatile box. The amp is recessed in the back of the cabinet, which affords a lifting handle. There are handles on the top, there's handles on the bottom, there's 2 handles on each side. You can grab it in the port. And this has a little lip on it, double thick for bracing, but also functions as a handle. This is a box that is an absolute workhorse. You can basically, there's nothing you can't do with the VS21 as long as you can get it in the building. In terms of presets on the VS21, it has the same basic layout as the other subwoofers in our line, which is 6 forward-facing regular presets, which begin with the lowest low-pass filter and move up deep bass subwoofer to more and more upper bass energy until you get to preset 7. Preset 7 is what we call good neighbor mode, which takes out the very low end and limits how much deep bass comes out of the box so that you're not quite shaking the building as much and not quite disturbing people from as far away. So if you need to be a good neighbor, you can run preset 7. Preset 8 is your cardioid mode. The VS21 is kind of cool for cardioid mode because with all these interlocking feet, you can stack them forward, backward, forward. You can do whichever combination. You use the cardioid mode for the box that's facing away from the audience, and you can face 2 boxes facing towards the audience. It does a real good job of canceling the energy that's wrapping around from those first 2 boxes. So that is the overview of the VS21, an incredibly versatile, efficient subwoofer that can do pretty much anything you throw at it, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. This is a favorite of a lot of people, and for good reason. If you need a subwoofer that can do anything, you need a VS21.